Your haircut? Noticed you've copied my beard. Oh, by the way, this is a friend of mine, Tree.
I am Groot!
From ditching Kang to Steve Rogers kissing Peggy's niece, the MCU isn't flawless, and Marvel would probably prefer if we forget about these blunders. In this list, we'll check out the missteps and less than successful moments that Marvel has either swept under the rug or not really addressed. Heads up, spoilers ahead. Let's dive into what we know. 20. The Rise of Doctor Doom and the Fall of Kang the Conqueror. Marvel Studios fired Jonathan Majors on December 18th, the same day he was found guilty on 2 domestic violence charges. Majors was supposed to be the major villain, Kang, leading the MCU's next phase. Loki Season 2, filmed before his arrest, aired in October with Majors in a big role. Avengers The Kang Dynasty was set to be the epic conclusion of the Multiverse saga, but now things have changed. Now, Robert Downey Jr. will replace the Kang Dynasty with Avengers Doomsday, shifting the focus to Doctor Doom. Honestly, this whole situation feels like something Marvel always knew was risky. Majors had a history of violent behavior, so casting him as Kang came with potential consequences. Now, with his exit and RDJ possibly stepping in as Doctor Doom, it almost feels like this was Marvel's plan all along. What seemed risky has turned into an unexpected twist that could work out brilliantly for the MCU. 19. Reasons why Deadpool's dance works and She-Hulk's sucks. People love Deadpool's dance but can't stand She-Hulk's. But why? Both scenes are pretty similar, characters breaking the fourth wall and dancing to pop songs. Yet Deadpool's works while She-Hulk's falls flat. Here's why. First, Deadpool dances to NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye, a hit everyone knows, while She-Hulk twerks to Megan Thee Stallion, who's less universally recognized. Second, Deadpool's choreography is fun and well executed, whereas She-Hulk's twerking is simple. Third, Deadpool's dance fits the story while She-Hulk's feels random. And lastly, Deadpool's scene happens at the beginning, setting the tone, while She-Hulk's post-credits dance feels like a throwaway joke. 18. Killing the King of Inhumans too soon was a big, risky move. The decision to kill off Black Bolt, the King of the Inhumans, so early in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was one of the most shocking moments in the MCU. While it certainly surprised fans, it raised the question, was it too soon? Black Bolt is a complex character with immense potential, and taking him out so quickly felt like a wasted opportunity. On one hand, some argue that his death heightened Wanda's threat level, showcasing just how dangerous she could be. However, many fans believe this move undercuts a potentially larger storyline involving the Inhumans. In the comics, Inhumans frequently battle mutants, and showing this dynamic in the MCU could have added depth and excitement. Without Black Bolt, a key player in that narrative, the loss feels particularly disappointing. It's just downright sad to see such a promising character written off so abruptly. 17. The Incredible Hulk. Just to clarify, we're not talking about the character of the Hulk. No, we're focused on the first film in the MCU where Hulk was a lead. Although it was one of the first films in the franchise, Marvel spent over a decade distancing itself from the specific events of the movie. Part of this is due to distribution issues with Universal. Additionally, it didn't help that the titular role was recast so that Mark Ruffalo could step in. It wasn't until projects like What If and She-Hulk that it felt like it was okay to acknowledge that the 2008 movie was still out there. However, fans won't forget that the Hulk's solo outing was a green sheep of the family for a long time. 16. Avengers Assemble. Sometimes. One of the best things about the MCU is how interconnected everything can feel. Heroes teaming up to take down a common threat rarely fails to deliver the hype. However, this can also be a double-edged sword for Marvel. When the Avengers don't join together to take on world-threatening villains, it feels a bit odd. We know that some enemies operate under the radar like Hydra, or create problems that most Avengers couldn't assist with, like the Dormammu conflict. But it's hard to believe that none of the Avengers responded to the massive holes in space during the Dark World. Now don't get us wrong, we love some of these solo films, but they largely require you to get amnesia about the other heroes. 15. The irrelevance of the Sovia Accords. During Captain America Civil War, the Avengers are nearly torn apart after the international community wants to regulate them and other superpowered individuals. Monitoring superpowered people does seem good in theory, but in practice, the paperwork was largely ineffective and irrelevant after they became the center of the Civil War conflict. Every now and then, the Accords got lip service in films and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but whenever the chips were down, the Avengers did what they needed to with basically no government oversight or consequences. The fact that it was casually revealed that the Sovia Accords were repealed in a quick exchange made it seem like Marvel just wants us to leave them in the past altogether. 14. Steve Rogers kissing Peggy's niece. Although Steve and Peggy planned to get together in 1945, he overshoots their date after he crashes a plane into ice to save lives. By the time he's thawed out in the 21st century, Peggy is an old woman who lived a full life, and Steve doesn't get to spend much time with her for the 4 years they have before she passes away. After Peggy's funeral, he goes on to kiss her great niece, Sharon. We get that she and Steve had chemistry before he knew about the family relationship, but Steve is making out with his great love's niece, which is still kind of weird. After he gets to go back in time, we wonder if he also conveniently forgot to tell Peggy about that kiss. 13. Excusing Wanda's actions. There's a lot of love about WandaVision, from its use of sitcom conventions to its examination of Wanda's trauma. However, at the end of the day, her powers inadvertently trap the residents of an entire town and force them to do things against their will. They all clearly bear signs of emotional trauma too. While Wanda may be the protagonist here, she's also clearly the villain. But several characters, particularly Monica Rambeau, tacitly forgive Wanda's crimes. Fans may have gone along with this if the Scarlet Witch wasn't immediately turned into a full-on villain again in Multiverse of Madness. It seemed like no one could decide if we were supposed to forgive or fear her. 12. Electro never unmasked Peter Parker. When fans look back at the major spell in No Way Home that transported villains from across the multiverse into the MCU, they noticed a few possible contradictions. The biggest one centered around the reason these particular baddies arrived. Although they are all supposed to know who Spidey is, the evil Electro is the notable exception. He never unmasked Peter during his movie, and while we were willing to believe we missed that scene in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Electro confirms that he never knew who Peter was with an admittedly hilarious exchange. Technically, the only villain from that movie that could have shown up was Harry, but fans were okay looking past the Electro issue if that meant the lackluster Goblin was left behind. 11. Thor: The Dark World. The second installment in the Thor franchise is definitely one of the franchise's weakest films to date. Its drab color palette, inconsistent tone, poorly realized villain, and baffling plot all held it back. Coincidentally, some of these complaints would go on to be lodged against Love and Thunder. While it's too soon to tell how the MCU will address the fourth entry going forward, fans spent years seeing Dark World fade to obscurity. The most ironic part of the sequel is that individual elements really work later on. For example, the death of Thor's mom, Frigga, played a vital role in her children's stories. But we're willing to bet Marvel would prefer you to watch the Endgame recap of the plot rather than the film. 10. There are ways around death. If a comic book film can help it, many of its heroes will stay alive. This makes it feel a little cheap when so many protagonists walk away from a battle unscathed. While the lack of heroes dying is waved away, its characters staying dead, that's the bigger issue. We're not saying that heroes like Iron Man and Black Widow will be revived anytime soon. However, time travel, life-restoring serums, and alternate universes mean killed-off characters have multiple avenues to return. While Gamora is a prime example of time-saving shenanigans, we forget how many times we've seen Loki die. It's hard to believe that characters like Scarlet Witch are truly gone when there are so many ways to bring them back. 9. MCU timeline and continuity issues. While the MCU generally maintains a solid timeline and continuity, it isn't free from its share of inconsistencies. Some issues are minor, such as the marketing of Gamora as the last of her species in Guardians of the Galaxy, which is contradicted in Infinity War when it's revealed that only half of her race was killed by Thanos. A more significant contradiction arises in Spider-Man Homecoming, which opens with a flashback set shortly after the Avengers in 2012 and then jumps 8 years to 2020. However, this timeline raises questions about how Peter Parker could utilize the Iron Spider suit, which he wouldn't receive until 2 years later, despite the film's release in 2018. 8. The confusing history of the Infinity Gauntlet. The Infinity Stones, central to Thanos' quest, have overshadowed the complex history of the Gauntlet itself. The Gauntlet first appears in Odin's vault in Asgard, but it's later revealed to be a fake. Thanos is shown wearing the real Gauntlet during a post-credit scene in Age of Ultron, suggesting his intent to collect the stones. Yet comments from Aether and Thor imply that the Gauntlet was created recently, raising questions about how Odin possessed a copy of a unique item that wouldn't be forged until after Thanos' arrival. 7. Multiverse numbering confusion. Marvel Comics has learned that tracking a multiverse can be tricky. Traditionally, the main continuity has been set on Earth 616, while the MCU was believed to exist on Earth 199,999. However, in Multiverse of Madness, the live-action universe was referred to as 616, leading to skepticism among fans and Marvel actors like Iman Vellani. The confusion deepened when Across the Spider-Verse identified the MCU as Earth 199,999. This discrepancy suggests different numbering systems across the multiverse, potentially indicating an attempt to smooth over an error. 6. The Iron Man 3 conclusion. Iron Man 3 concludes with Tony Stark reevaluating his role as a superhero, undergoing surgery to remove shrapnel from his heart and blowing up his suits. Despite this apparent retirement, he returns to fighting crime in the next Avengers film and clearly has created new suits. The lack of hints explaining Tony's change of heart makes it seem as though subsequent films overlook the ending of Iron Man 3. 5. Director departures. Marvel has established a distinct tone and style across its films, which can stifle creative expressions for directors. Those unable to align their vision with Marvel's often find themselves dismissed despite their talent. For example, Patty Jenkins, who directed Wonder Woman, almost helmed the second Thor film, and Edgar Wright exited Ant-Man due to behind-the-scenes conflicts. James Gunn's firing from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and later reinstatement indicate a potential shift in how Marvel approaches its directors. 4. TV-Netflix show disconnect. Before the advent of Disney Plus and Kevin Feige's broader oversight of Marvel TV, the MCU felt disjointed, with movies and TV shows rarely interacting meaningfully. This separation stemmed from conflicts behind the scenes, primarily between Feige and former Marvel CEO Ike Perlmutter. Following Perlmutter's gradual removal, MCU TV series began to integrate more closely with the films, allowing characters from Netflix shows to make appearances in newer content. 3. Female lead solo movies. Despite progress in building the MCU across films and TV, it took a long time to highlight female heroes. While shows like Jessica Jones and Agent Carter showcased strong female leads, the first solo female-led MCU film didn't arrive until 2019. Many fans felt Black Widow's film, which came after her in-universe death, was too late. While the MCU is moving toward a more balanced lineup, the uneven representation remains noteworthy. 2. Underdeveloped villains. A common critique of the MCU is its tendency to feature underdeveloped villains. While standout characters like Killmonger and Thanos have made a lasting impact, many villains lack memorable backstories or motivations. This issue persists even in well-received films, such as the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Though improvements have been made, including strong villains like Wenwu, they often meet untimely ends, leaving fans wanting more enduring antagonists. 1. The Inhumans fiasco. Among the MCU's missteps post-Endgame, none stands out quite like Inhumans. Initially planned as a film, it was ultimately produced as a TV series. The promise of IMAX screenings led fans to expect a cinematic experience, but the show's flaws became even more pronounced. With lackluster characters and a weak plot, it failed to engage audiences. The poor CGI effects, especially regarding Medusa's hair, contributed to its unpopularity. Aside from a cameo in Multiverse of Madness, it's unlikely Marvel will revisit this failed project anytime soon. And that's that for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in our next video.